Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 Survival Panel session for small business that we're presenting today. I have two keynote speakers with me today. We have Trent Butler from Trent Butler Consulting in Sydney. How are you, Trent?
Well, Peter, yourself?
Good, thanks. And Arthur Acker, the Operations Manager for Equitise, also in Sydney. How are you today, Arthur?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. So welcome, and welcome to the people who are watching this presentation on Facebook Live. For those of you who are watching the webinar live, you're able to type in any questions that you may have for the presenters, and I will ask them those questions later in the webinar. For those of you who are watching this presentation on Facebook Live, unfortunately, you can't type straight into our live webinar broadcast, but you can send your questions via an email. Please address them to Peter at ESS BIZTOOLS, BIZTOOLS.com.au. And I'm the Managing Director of ESS Small Business. I now want to introduce you to Trent Butler, who's going to talk to you about the 7 steps to marketing success for small businesses in a COVID-19 environment. So we'll just bring up Trent and we'll change the sharing, and it's over to Trent. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Happy to be here and thanks for having me. I'll do my best to get the share right with this Zoom.
Yep.
All right, good stuff.
Slides are up now. Yep.
All right, fantastic. Well, this is it's a bit of a topical subject, isn't it? Because I think a lot of businesses, obviously, Peter, as you well broadcast, are doing it tough in this environment. Some aren't, some are thriving. But I think now is probably a good time than ever to really take stock of our practice development or marketing initiatives within the business. And really, I guess, almost come up with a bit of a game plan in terms of what makes sense strategically moving forward. And so that's really what I wanted to come up with and present, is basically go over what I see is the 7 sort of key areas that will help, businesses, small businesses of really any kind, move forward in this environment. And so I normally bring up a poll at this point, but I won't, because I know we're sort of keeping to a pretty tight time frame. But typically, if you can just think to yourself, what's the #1 way you go about winning new business? And typically it's, regardless of industry, it's pretty consistent that, most small business owners claim that the main source of their business or new business is referrals and word of mouth. And so that's interesting when you consider it in the context of a few other interesting numbers, which one of those is, 61% of mobile searchers are more likely to contact a local business if they have a mobile-friendly website. Or 87% of potential customers or clients won't consider a business with low review ratings online. Or 64% of consumers say watching a marketing video on Facebook has influenced a purchasing decision in the last month. And so really what we find is, despite the fact that referrals and word of mouth are still prevalent within any sort of industry, really the thing that has changed, is changing and is continuing to change, is how people go about buying services. And no industry is really immune. It's pretty much across the board. Some are more affected than others. And traditionally, you might see the sales cycle looking pretty linear, or where there was some simple marketing, which pretty quickly led to a sale or a service being provided. But now it's more like this, where you might see a consumer of a product or service, doing a few things. They might be talking to their colleagues or associates about your service. They're doing their own research. They're looking at social media. They're looking at things like Facebook, LinkedIn for information. They're doing their own investigations before ultimately choosing to come on board. And I think what's driving that is, there's a couple of things, but I wanted to just share some quick graphs and charts. Really, the number of Google searches, if you like, exploded from 2005, and that continues to ramp up. And I think we've only got till 2012, but I can say the trend has continued. And really what that's pointing to is an empowered consumer of really any product or service in the marketplace. Similarly, we can see the number of people that are using social media platforms, particularly from 2008. You can see Facebook just take off. And again, it just feeds into this dynamic where, people that are buying products and services, whether it's a local restaurant and cafe, all the way through to high-end professional advisory services, what we're finding is that more and more the consumer of those services or products are being influenced by a business's online presence. And that really introduces, I guess, the 7 quick things I want to, or core issues I want to touch on today. And really each one of these is sort of, a 2-hour presentation by itself. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to go pretty quickly and just touch on some very high level fundamentals. But really when we put these 7 elements together, which is strategy, a website, a content strategy or platform, SEO, social media, email marketing, and pay-per-click advertising, I think when you bring those elements together for a small business, it really does allow for a complete, online presence or marketing strategy and approach. And so just to touch on some of those 7 core elements, what's really fundamental to a marketing strategy is creating a core message and a strategy of difference. And this applies whether, again, you're a plumber, a restaurant, a professional services firm, basically a business of any type really needs to come up with a core message and strategy of difference to really leverage and build an entire marketing system from. And there's a lot of ways to think about this, but one of the key things to have is to really think about what makes your ideal client or customer. And you can generally group people into some buckets. So must have, what characteristics must a client have in order to take them on? What's nice to have? So what do we, really ideally in an ideal world, what characteristics do they have? And then going up from that is who's our ideal client? And it's really trying to build a strategic approach to marketing around getting more ideal clients. One way to think about that in terms of one framework is to think about, well, who's not only our profitable existing clients, but also are raving fans or refer people to us? What do they look like? What are their, what's their persona? What if you could narrow down 5 or 10 characteristics around that type of person or business? What are they? And then how do we go about building a marketing approach that goes and finds more of those people? And the other thing to keep in mind around strategy is, and this is particularly relevant in this environment, is no one really wants what we sell. They want their problems solved. And so regardless of what business you're in, I think that's something to keep top of mind at all times. People want their problems solved. They don't necessarily want your solution. I got my car serviced just last week, Peter, and I didn't really like going to the mechanic, but I knew I had to go there to have a car that worked to prevent problems from down the road, and that's why I went. And so really you can apply that across the board, and it's something to keep top of mind. And I think also for small business in this environment too, Peter, is people still have problems, and it's a case of understanding what those problems are. Maybe for your market or for any market, those problems are slightly different in this particular environment, but it's keeping this concept or idea top of mind and really building a marketing approach around it. The second thing I want to touch on in a holistic marketing strategy is really having a website that converts visitors to clients or customers. And here's to throw some further numbers at everyone. 92% of consumers will visit a brand's website for the first time for reasons other than making a purchase. And so really in today's modern world, the website has a lot of heavy lifting to do. And these are just some of the elements that a homepage needs to have. And I'll touch on and show some examples of some of the key ones now. So fundamentally, and this ties back to having that core marketing message, we need to have a promise that solves a problem. So, this is just one example of a CFO advisory practice, an entire accounting team of specialists for less than the cost of an in-house bookkeeper. And then, your CFO one team gives you the information analysis and support needed to, trust your data, etc. So, that's above the fold, front and center. It's talking in terms of problems and how we, and I guess it shows how this particular business understands the problems of their market. Recommendations and social proof are critical, and these should be brought to the front of pretty much every business's homepage. So, obviously most businesses is generated through referrals and word of mouth. The way that translates online is through these referrals, or through having testimonials and proof that people, actually like working with you. Again, identifying who our ideal client personas are. So the type of people that we typically go about working with, having a section on the homepage of a website that describes those people, I think can be pretty much applied regardless of whatever small business you're in. And very importantly, also calls to action. So when someone visits our website, we need to be cognizant and aware of the buyer's journey. So what do we want that person to do moving forward? Do we want them to get on the phone with us? Do we want them to dive deeper into our methodology? And do we need to educate them a little bit further before they decide to make a purchasing decision or jump on the phone with us? So whatever that is for your small business is building that into the website and making sure that that call to action is front and center, so that the buyer knows, or the person checking out your site knows what the next step is. Now, I'll quickly touch on SEO, because I think depending on the overall marketing strategy a business is going with, determines the importance or significance of SEO. But generally speaking, I think if you're adopting a local business approach, if you're a restaurant, a cafe, or if you're providing a service, if you're an accounting practice that's adopting, say, a local or geographical focus as part of their core strategy, then I think SEO is something that makes sense. And, most people online, when they're looking for a local business, they do turn to search engines. And, you can just really look at yourself, I think, and how we all make decisions in terms of who we want to work with and what we're going to buy. Pretty much everyone Googles it these days. And so that is just really, getting SEO right and having a website that's optimized and takes into account SEO is something that needs to be considered. So just at a very high level, the three biggies are site structure and function. So is your website structured in a way that's going to support SEO and allow the search engines to find you? The stuff on your site, so this is alluding to content, making sure we've got content that's keyword rich and gives us an understanding of, or gives the search engines the information that they need to know what keywords, your market's going to be searching Google for. And so having content that's rich with those keywords is always going to be part of an SEO strategy. And then also having stuff on your site that talks about stuff on other sites that talks about the things on your site. And so that's where we get into this world of backlinks and, having other local businesses linking to your site in some way to further increase your site's credibility and I guess, move you up the rankings in Google. Another point to touch on is letting your customers talk about how great you are with customer reviews. So reviews are going to be the bread and butter of a lot of small businesses, particularly local small businesses, and having those front and center online and having a strategy and an approach to actually go about obtaining those reviews in an efficient manner is really important. And I appreciate I'm flying through this, Peter, but I just want to give as much as I can and give people a holistic picture to think about. So if I am going too quick, just let me know.
You're going okay.
How am I going for time? I think I'm
yeah. You got another 10 or 12 minutes. So.
Okay, good stuff. The other point is using social media to create awareness and build trust. And so social media from a strategic perspective is pretty much these days finding its way into every business or industry, regardless of what you're providing. Some it's more important than others. And certainly those firms or businesses that are adopting a national approach, a national strategy to their marketing, I think really social media makes sense, and particularly for professional services firms who are taking that strategic approach and looking for businesses at a national level. I think tools like LinkedIn, in particular for that market, is really something that needs to be strongly considered. And really, there's a lot of things to talk about with regards to social media, but the main thing really is to see it as a platform for sharing your brand and your content. So it's a terrific medium for people to get to know, like, and trust you, your brand. And, you know, people I know, I think, are tuning in from Facebook for this presentation today. So, you know, it's sort of preaching to the choir for that group. But I think typically adopting a content strategy that's going to allow you to be seen, to be known, and really educate your market about the problems and challenges that they're having in their business, so that when they do come around to making a purchasing decision, you know, you're in the game because they're familiar with you, they've seen you before, and they're starting to know and like your brand. And so in terms of different types of content, what we typically see work right now really well on social media is owned. So the posts that you put on there, typically video is a fantastic medium, particularly for, well, pretty much for LinkedIn and Facebook. Putting video of yourself talking about your thoughts, concepts, and ideas around the marketplace is extremely powerful and really does well. Earned, so this is something where you're commenting on someone else's post. So perhaps you might have some businesses that serve the same market or industry as you, that you're non-compete with, that you provide complementary products or services to. And so that's a great way to comment, like, and share their posts as a way of networking within your industry, but also informing potential consumers of your advice or your product. And then, of course, paid. I think there's certainly over time, we're seeing a trend where the online channels are moving to a pay to play model. So Facebook at the moment very much is a pay to play platform. LinkedIn is not, and there's fantastic opportunities for those that want to take that on and really build a content strategy around that platform, because right now the organic or free reach through the platform really is phenomenal. But I think that will change in time. But for now, there's some really great ways to engage your market through that platform. And then that sort of segues into a brief discussion about online advertising. And I think for a lot of local businesses, Peter, and I appreciate this is a small business webinar, I think pay-per-click probably needs to move its way. And so some Google advertising around pay-per-click ads needs to make its way into a marketing strategy pretty much for all businesses. And over time, we're seeing Google leave little room to SEO and organic search. And in some industries, paid is the only way to get featured on the first page. And so, you know, if someone's going to dive into Google Ads, for example, I'd really suggest either educating yourself on how to do it or paying a professional to do it for you. Google, the way they're structured, they will give you some recommendations, but you know, they're a business like everyone else, and really the research is suggesting that, you know, you're giving a lot of additional money unnecessarily if you're going to just run with what Google's telling you to do. And this is just a really quick sort of high-level course on Udemy. If there's people here in the audience that think that this is a strategy for them, they can go and quickly upskill on a platform like that. And the final thing to touch on is really tracking data. You know, the one or the biggest change in the marketing world probably over the last decade or so is just how everything can be tracked and really broken down into numbers. And we can make decisions strategically based on data. So, you know, everyone in small business, the gut check or, you know, the gut way of thinking is always going to exist. But I think supplementing that with hard numbers in the right circumstances makes a lot of sense, and really doubling down on what's working and cutting what's not over time really is an approach that I think should be adopted by pretty much everyone. And so really, I know I've just sort of rattled that off super quick, but I did want to just sort of, you know, at a very high level, touch on the core components that I think are out there for small business. And it's really about getting them all working together for you in synchronization. That's really going to move the needle forward in this environment. And I really think the first piece, or if people are thinking, well, gee, where do I start? It's really around that strategy. So really getting an understanding of who my ideal client is, what message should I be taking to the market, what's my brand story, And there's probably a dozen or so other items that need to be considered and ways to go about finding that before you actually dive into the tactics that I've spoken about. So that's the high level, Peter, of what I wanted to go through with your audience today, which has hopefully been helpful. So I'm not sure, I've got a couple of minutes. So did you want to do questions at all, Peter? Did you have any questions?
Well, yeah, I've got a couple of questions here that people have asked me recently, so I thought I'd ask you today.
Yeah, great.
A strategy to obtain reviews. How does a business person go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great tools available online to actually go about executing that. Grade Us, so grade.us is a tool that I think is worth looking into for people if they want to do it themselves. Basically, that is a way of, they've got some templates, some template emails that they can send out to their market, and that will allow them to get those reviews. It synchronizes with the review platforms, so like Google, Facebook, etc. And so that's a really great way, I think, to go about getting reviews. And that's how I do it, and that's how I do it with my clients.
But the business operators have to instigate this concept of asking their clients, their customers, their viewers to give a review on their business.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Okay. So you've got to take a proactive mindset to obtaining reviews. If you're just sitting back and waiting for people to come in and, out of the goodness of their heart, take the time out to leave you a review, it doesn't really happen like that. They've got to be pushed.
You've got to activate it.
You've got to be proactive.
Proactive to activate it. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned links, and this is what you had under the heading of earned. You just want to, again, a business should be talking to their suppliers, their customers, their affiliates and others about how they can share information. Is that what you're getting at? And how do they then go about getting the linkage to work?
Yeah, spot on. So pretty much every business is migrating towards having a strategy around these platforms. Some faster than others, mind you, but that's always going to happen. And I think, your suppliers, in whatever industry you're in, some of those people will be migrating their way to these platforms. And so what I'm getting at there is really having a list of those suppliers as part of the strategy and looking out for their posts and, sharing their posts. Using LinkedIn as an example, there's a mechanism to click share on a post, and that will then share your supplier's content to your network of connections. And so that's doing two things. One, it's demonstrating to your network that you're connected and that you have useful information and insight, which is hopefully getting them to know and like your brand. But similarly as well, it's not going to go unnoticed by suppliers, and the suppliers are going to appreciate that engagement and the fact that you're sharing their content as well, which is further going to add to increase and strengthen that relationship. So it's really a two-way benefit.
But a business hasn't got to get permission of their supplier to do that. They can voluntarily do that.
Yeah, that's correct. That's right.
Okay. Righto. You got any questions, Arthur, on what Trent just had to say?
No, I'm all good. That was very interesting. Thank you, Trent.
Okay.
Yeah, most welcome.
Trent, the pay-per-click ads that I think I've noted down here that you referred to, what did you... Did I write that right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's essentially...
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
That's essentially where if you go to Google and you can type anything you like, what will happen is there'll be ads that will come up as the first few in any search. And so what's happening more and more is that page one of Google is particularly for local businesses, not so much for those that are adopting a national strategy, but for local businesses where their consumers purchase through channels like Google, page one is quite valuable to be on. And so, a lot of businesses are just saying, well, to get there, we'll just pay for it.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, that's how that works.
Okay. Righto, well, thank you very much, and we'll
Yeah.
see if we get some other questions later on. And I'm now going to take the screen share back if I can.
Yeah, no worries.
And I'm now going to introduce you to our next speaker, who's Arthur Acker, the Operations Manager of Equitise. And Arthur is going to talk today on democratising investing. So how are you, Arthur?
I'm very good, and you, Peter?
Very good, thank you. Bit cool, I think, all around Australia today. Now, just a minute, I've done that the wrong way. I should have done it the other. So we'll now have you up. You're on the screen. Thanks, Arthur.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, Peter, for having us. I will share my screen now with a short presentation on Equitise and how we can help businesses. Here you go. So Equitise is an online investment platform, and we help businesses to raise capital from a broad network of investors across Australia and New Zealand. And today I'm going to talk to you about how you can raise capital with platforms such as us in order to fund your growth, as we're seeing a lot of companies at the moment really looking to raise capital to seize these opportunities in these times ahead of us. So what we mostly focus on at Equitise is equity crowdfunding. So usually everyone knows about reward crowdfunding. That's Kickstarter kind of campaigns where a company that is usually selling a product will raise money from buyers by pre-selling this product. Equity crowdfunding is slightly different. You're still engaging a crowd of people, but people are not going to buy your product. They're going to actually buy shares in your company and invest in your business. And this allows you to raise capital and to fund the growth of the company. So to date, investment in early stage company was really limited to sophisticated and high net worth investors, so angel kind of investors. But 2 years ago, the new legislation came in place in Australia to allow early stage businesses to use equity crowdfunding. So this means that now anyone who is more than 18 years old can invest even a small amount. It can start from $50 and buy shares in these early stage companies. For the companies, you can raise up to $5 million every year through equity crowdfunding. So equity crowdfunding is really a powerful way of raising capital because it's not only about raising, it's also about marketing and brand awareness. So for those businesses who have like kind of B2C businesses with an existing customer base, who want to really get their brand out there and get more people to discover the business, to become brand advocates, it's a really powerful way. So it will increase market awareness. It will allow you to grow your user and customer base. All your new shareholders will become loyal brand advocates and will refer your company to their network. And it's a really good model that can be repeated for subsequent capital raise. So once you've done one equity crowdfund, you can very easily do another one the following year, and you can really count on the engaged crowd that you had from the initial crowdfund. We are seeing a lot of interest from investors for equity crowdfunding, and that's because it's a new way of investing for non-sophisticated investors. So they can invest from only $50 and get ownership in these companies they could not really get exposure to before. It has a great potential for returns for these investors, and it's a really good way of diversifying their portfolio versus more traditional assets. So just to give you a bit of an overview, there are some businesses which are a really good fit for equity crowdfunding. So typically, a B2C company is a very good fit because they have an existing customer base. People will know what the company is about, and you can really engage these customers and brand advocates to back the business and to invest in the crowdfund. If the company has a strong distribution of engaged customers and followers, that's also a very important component of a successful crowdfund. This means you can communicate with all these people about the coming soon offer. You can really engage them in the raise, and you can really get more momentum in the capital raise. Strong commercial prospects is a very important aspect. Equity crowdfunding is still an investment opportunity for investors. So we need to be able to explain why we're raising capital for the company and why we think it's a great investment opportunity. So if the company has an impressive growth over the past few years and a strong trajectory, that's really great for the crowdfund. And a reputable and experienced team obviously is also an important component, because investors will look at who is behind the business, why they should invest in the business, and trust the team, and why the team is the best at what they do. So there are some sectors and industries who usually do very well in equity crowdfunding, who gather those kind of B2C, good distribution, strong prospects, and good team. So the sector that performs the best in equity crowdfunding is usually the fintech. And that's because there is a lot of appetite from investors in Australia and in New Zealand for those fintech opportunities. There are many examples of successful companies in Australia. Lately, you have Afterpay, which is killing it on the stock exchange. But there are also like some smaller businesses in the fintech sector which are doing very well, and some of them have raised capital through equity crowdfunding. And I'll show you an example a bit later today. Food and beverage companies tend to do very well too. So we've done raise for beer companies or gin companies. These do very well. Usually people are very excited about the opportunity to buy shares in their favorite beer company, for example. Same thing with food companies, restaurants, cafes, these kind of businesses. They can really work well with equity crowdfunding. The other two sectors that usually do well are retail and online, and shared economy businesses. So for example, Car Next Door, which I'm going to show you a quick example later today, is a shared economy company we've done a raise for, and we got a lot of interest from investors. So this is just a quick overview of typically what kind of businesses tend to do very well in equity crowdfunding. It doesn't mean you need to be exactly like these businesses. Investors are still looking for various opportunities, but these are the kind of components that we recognize in all the most successful raise to date. But obviously, if you have your own business and you want to reach out to us at some point and discuss the possibility of doing a capital raise, do so. You'll have my contact details at the end, and we can assess how we may be able to help the company. Just a very quick overview of how to make sure that your business is ready to run a crowdsourced funding offer. There are a few requirements from ASIC in order to run a CSF raise. The first requirement is for the company to have at least 2 directors. So if you're really looking at engaging for a crowdfund, then you need to make sure that you have 2 directors. It's important that you have a good and up-to-date pitch deck with an overview of the financials, because this is what is going to allow us to review your company and to assess if we think that we can help you raise capital. So a pitch deck is really important. Whatever type of capital raise you want to do, you really need a good pitch deck. It is also important to have an up-to-date constitution and shareholders agreement to welcome new investors and new shareholders in the business and make sure that there's a strong contract in place for all those shareholders. A good financial forecast model that you can put in place with your accountant. That's also very important for all potential investors who want to see what the business could do and how it could perform, particularly as the company is going to raise capital to fund its growth. And then there are 2 other things that can be very important is have an engaged community. So if you're a B2C business, but you haven't really gone out to your customers, to social media yet, it is very important for a crowdfund to really engage everyone behind the brand. So if you can start promoting your company, building a crowd behind the company, that will be very powerful for the raise. And pre-funding can also be quite an important component. If you are already talking to a few potential investors, you have people in your close network who are interested, this is really good to help generate momentum in the raise and to show that it is not only like that you have people already investing in that round, that then you want to top it up with new investors. So a quick overview on Equitize. So we are the leading investment platform in Australia and New Zealand. We've been operating for the past 5 years. we've successfully raised capital for 74 companies all across Australia and New Zealand. We've raised close to $45 million now, and that's from 10,000 investments. So 10,000 individual people have invested to date on our platform in these early stage companies. We have a database of 45,000 people we go out to with every opportunity, and we have a success rate of 90%. So 9 offers out of 10 that we put on the platform are successful. So this means that we're quite good at selecting which businesses we think will succeed on the platform. But equity crowdfunding is not the only way of raising capital. You know, there are very different types of businesses out there. So it's not the only way we can help you. There are other more traditional ways of raising capital. One of them is sophisticated investors. So we have a strong network of sophisticated investors. And for some of these businesses, which may not be very retail friendly, a bit more sophisticated, maybe more risky businesses or more early stage businesses, we have a network of angel and sophisticated investors. We can also take these opportunities too. We have a good network of institutional partners, and we've also been working on some IPOs for some companies, looking at getting some spread during the IPO. So now I'm going to show you some examples of clients we've been working with and a few case studies so you can really have a better understanding. But this is just a quick overview of the type of companies and industries we've been working with and raising capital for. So Zinja is a quite famous Australian neobank, so fintech company. Manrags is a socks and jocks subscription company doing very well. Emperor Champagne is an online shop for French champagne. Car Next Door, Goodmans was another fintech platform. So really different type of businesses, different type of stages. Some are early, some larger companies like Car Next Door. But that's really what investors are looking at the moment is really these unique investment opportunities to diversify their portfolio and to invest in different stages and industries. So quickly, I'm going to show you a few case studies of some campaigns that we've done on the Equitize platform. The first one I want to quickly talk about is Zinja. So Zinja is a renowned neobank in Australia. They are the most successful crowdfunding in Australia to date. They've raised close to $5.5 million through equity crowdfunding across 2 offers. And they got 2,500 investors through these 2 offers. So the company was raised, each of these raises was part of larger raise, but they really want to do a crowdfund because they wanted to engage people in the brand and welcome their first shareholders who would become the first customers. So they really leveraged the brand and their communication to get people in, to get these people to invest. And those shareholders are really a key component of the success of the company now. Another example is Endeavour Brewing Co. Endeavour is a beer and brewer based in Sydney in the Rocks. So this was the first raise in Australia for a beer company. It's been very successful. We've raised close to 600K from 585 investors. Everyone was super excited about the opportunity to own shares in a brewery. And this was a very good example of a local Australian company succeeding through the crowdfund. So as I said before, we also have a network of sophisticated investors, and we take some of these offers only to these sophisticated investors. So Car Next Door and DAISEE are a couple of examples of raise we can do. So for example, for Car Next Door, we've raised $1 million over 2 rounds. DAISEE, we've raised $1.5 million from 10 investors. So if your business you think is not necessarily a good fit for equity crowdfunding and you're not looking at the marketing and engagement of a crowdfund, then feel free to reach out to us because we can definitely look at other ways of raising capital. And then, as I said before, we've also done some IPOs for some businesses. Identity is one of these companies. So as you may know, in order to list on the ASX, you need to have at least 300 shareholders. Sometimes the company doesn't have these 300 shareholders in the process of the IPO, so they'll come to us in order to get what we call retail spread. So at least 300 names to invest. So that's what we did for Identity, for example. We raised 1.7 mil from 289 investors, which allowed then the company to list on the ASX. So here you have my contact details. So feel free to write down my email and to send me a quick email if you have any question. I hope this was clear. So yeah, we are there to help these businesses to raise capital. We have quite a strong network and quite a few successes to date. So I think now is a really good opportunity for local businesses to raise capital, to fund their growth, and to try to secure their market shares. So if that's something of interest, just give us a call or send us an email and we can have a chat and see how we can help you.
Thank you very much, Arthur. I've got a couple of questions. I might start it, then we'll see if Trent's got any. You talked about the engaging your community and start promoting. Could companies utilize some of the social media strategies that Trent was referring to there to communicate with their suppliers, their customers, and the market generally to try to get them, that they could then be referring to them as part of their engaged community?
Exactly, that's a very good point. So if you are a small business and at this stage you don't really have a social media strategy, you should definitely work on that and have a look at what Trent said before. And once you start building this community of followers, whether it's through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, on these various channels, these are really people you can engage for anything that you want to do with the business. So they will become customers, they can become shareholders, they can test your products, like they can become referrals. So yes, you should definitely work on the social media strategy before looking at a crowdfund, because that's an important component of a successful crowdfund.
Thank you. Did you have any comments on that, Trent?
I had a couple of questions, Arthur, and sorry to put you on the spot. It was just a couple of things you mentioned. I thought I'd just see if you had an answer. You mentioned you've got a great success rate with raising funding for those that actually get through. Mm-hmm. Are you able to comment, and if you're not, totally fine, but on those that you see coming forward that perhaps don't have all of those things lined up and therefore don't get through to the platform?
So how we operate is every business that comes to us so what I want to say is we'll look at every opportunity that comes to us and we meet with the founders, go through the pitch deck in detail, go through the financials, try to really understand what the business is about, what are the key strengths of the company. And at some point we have limited capacity in how many offers we can put on the platform. So we only put like 4 to 5 offers every month on the platform.
Got it.
And that's what we really test initially is how much interest, how much success we think we can achieve with the company. If we don't think we're going to run a successful campaign, then we just won't engage with the business and explain why and say, well, we don't want to spend some time with you, spend a lot of effort with you on a crowdfund or another type of phrase and not succeed. So we have quite a high success rate because we're quite selective about the businesses that we onboard, and we have a very good understanding of what our network of investors is looking for. But again, we look at every opportunity that comes to us, we look at it in detail, and we provide like thorough feedback to those businesses as to why we may or we may not engage, what we think is missing, where they should get to if they really want to consider a crowdfund. We had a webinar a couple of weeks ago with Pete and some accountants, and what we're trying to explain is that not every company may be suitable today to raise capital. It's an important exercise to welcome new shareholders in your business, but that's where those accountants can really help get them ready, whether it's with the pitch deck, the financials, the governance with the business and things like that.
Do you often see that was my second question. Do you often see these companies going and getting help before they come to you? And is that help typically internal on the team of the company or are they using an external person?
It really depends, to be honest. We sometimes have those companies which are very sophisticated, have raised capital in the past, have a very strong network of VCs on the board, and everything gets done very quickly and very professionally because they're used to it. But yes, sometimes we have businesses which are small businesses operated by a family. They've been running the business for the past 10, 20 years. Yeah. They haven't necessarily got external investors to date. These people may require more help. Yeah. Usually it's a balance of us and the existing team in the company that will provide this help. Yeah. Often the accountant of the company is also a very strong, important component of the raise because he will help advise the company on their end, and then on our end, we will give them all the tools and all the advice we can from a platform perspective. But yes, there are less sophisticated businesses out here, but equity crowdfunding is really the idea is to democratize investing. So we're trying to make things easy so that we can onboard a company easily, we can run the campaign easily. So we provide a lot of past campaigns examples to the company. We help them put together every aspect of the raise. Yep. Before we go out to investors and to really help them in that, cool. In that regards.
Thanks, Arthur. That was really interesting. So thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Trent.
Yes, thanks very much, Arthur. And we might just move on and we'll come back and see if there's any other questions for you later on. And I now want to go into our COVID-19 news update. Every week there's something a little bit different comes up. But first of all, for SMEs, please remember that the Special Reserve Bank Australian Government funded loans, which are only available through banks, the Coronavirus SME Guarantee Loans, these conclude on the 30th of September. The strict understanding from the Reserve Bank was that any of the $105 billion supplied by the Reserve Bank and the federal government were to be returned to the Reserve Bank at the 30th of September if it hasn't been lent by the banks. And there's no guarantees, no security on those loans. Although some of the banks are asking for personal guarantees, and those loans are 50% guaranteed by the federal government. They're probably worthwhile looking at. And we're going to talk about problems after the 30th of September, or what the market thinks are going to be the problems in a moment. If your turnover dropped 30% in the month of June, and you're not currently in the JobKeeper program, you could apply. Please see your accountant urgently. You need to get in. You need to supply information to the taxation office, and you would then be able to get JobKeeper at $1,500 per fortnight per employee between June and the end of September, and possibly longer if your industry group gets some sort of extension of the JobKeeper program by the government, and the government is to announce that next week on the 23rd of July. A reminder that if you're in the building or construction or tradies for kitchens or bathrooms manufacture, that the government's given a great opportunity to you because there are grants available now for homeowners. There are means tests, but it's fairly broad. And for renovators of homes, their private homes, of $25,000. It's taken the various state governments and territory governments a bit of time to get all this organised at their end, because that's where the grants are going to be sourced by these people. But perhaps you should be talking to someone like Trent and getting a social media campaign underway to promote in your communities that you're interested in talking to these people who can access these grants. If you've qualified for JobKeeper, if you haven't already done something about your commercial tenancy and you wish to, you can do so and renegotiate your rent that's on your commercial premises, but you have to qualify for JobKeeper. Whether you actually enter into the arrangement to be paid $1,500 per fortnight doesn't matter, but you have to qualify. If you have any doubts about that, please talk to your accountant and get that process organised. The major banks announced last week after some pressure from the Federal Treasurer, that for people who they've negotiated a loan extension for 6 months with no action, that they will look at a repayment holiday over a further 4 months. So that would take you through to January next year. But the banks have stressed that this will not happen automatically. You have to go and apply. And I'd suggest if you're going to apply, you will need to have prepared a business plan, budget and cash flow forecast to be submitted to your banker. And you would be best advised to talk to your accountant about those documents so that you can go in there armed with the information that the banks will need. A reminder that the second phase of superannuation drawdowns is now available. If you meet the conditions, please talk to your accountant. And if you wish, you can access that money. I saw some figures yesterday. There's a lot of money already flowed out of superannuation. Please be aware, though, that perhaps you should look at alternatives before you draw down on your superannuation fund, which is obviously being provided to assist you when you do retire. So let's look at an action plan. As I see it at present, virtually every financial media commentator is predicting that it's going to be difficult for businesses, especially small businesses and medium-sized enterprises, to borrow money from banks after the 30th of September. In fact, in yesterday's Financial Review, there's a headline, "Banks Face Multi-Year Cycle of Bad Debts," which is really summarising the potential problems that the banks are envisaging. And that's one of the reasons I believe that if your forward forecasts are saying that you could have a funding problem later in 2020-21, why not take advantage now of the coronavirus SME guarantee loans? They're up to $250,000. They're for 3 years. There's no specific security required. One bank's making those loans go through at 4.5%. Pretty good deal if you can't get the money elsewhere, because after the end of September, it might be very difficult to get money from any source. Just remember, you're going to need your business plan, budgets, cash flows. I think now is the time. If you've never done an annual strategic plan in your business career, and I don't care if you've been in business for 10, 20, or 30 years, this is the year you are going to need it. 2021 is going to be a very tough year for business. So what you might do is, when you're looking at the funding exercise, is look at opportunities like raising capital as crowdsourced funding. If you've got a reasonable business, you've got a vision, you've got a leadership team that wants to create new things, you could look at that. Or perhaps you want to spark up your social media presence, or perhaps you haven't even got one at this stage, or your websites. And you could talk to someone like Trent, or he might refer you to someone else. But you can contact both of our speakers today to get some follow-up information from them, because now is the time I really would urge you to be planning your strategies for this year. The Australian Government's Small Business Ombudsman, Kate Carnell, has indicated that she wants the banks to go very softly until the 31st of December 2021. That's the problems that she's envisaging are going to occur to businesses. Now, the banks haven't agreed to that, and I don't think they will, to be honest. Now is the time for you to be working out where you're headed, what are the funding difficulties, and if you are offering credit in your business, so you've got debtors, please blow out the debtors days outstanding. If you're currently got debtors paying you on 50 days, I think you should do some exercises on 60 and 70 days and see if you can still finance your business. And if not, I'd be trying to get hold of one of those loans so that you've got a bit of reserve, because the expectations are that as the banks get harder to deal with, the flow of payments by debtors will slow up considerably also, and that could cause some real problems. So I've talked about that, and I got ahead of myself there. We've already talked about those things. ESS Small Business can help you. We have a range of products which will help small business operators with their survival plans, your debtors management, making sure the prices you've set in your business or the charge out rates if you're a tradie are going to generate the profitability that you're forecast in your budgets. This is a real problem area. People put figures into budgets like, we're going to achieve a turnover of $3 million next year. That's a figure. But you then need, if you're a tradie, go through and do the exercise. How many employees have you got? What are their chargeable hours? What productivity are you expecting? And then monitor that each week to make sure that's what you're getting. Because that should be the basis that you're setting your charge out rate, that it's going to generate the profitability that you're forecast. A lot of people come undone on this. In a retail shop, if you've got the product mixes right, it's no use selling 100% of a very low markup. You have to sell a lot of product to generate enough money to get your profit. You have to be selling a significant amount of the higher markup items. And that's where you need to be monitoring it very closely. Did you sell the quantity that you expected of your markup of 120, 150% this week? And if not, what are you going to do in your product mix, your marketing, your social media usage and promotions to try to get customers to buy those higher markup products? Because that's where your profitability is in most cases. So why not visit us, where you can learn more about the tools that we have to offer and look at the systems manuals. Next week, we have our next webinar, the 22nd at 12 noon AEST. The presenters are Renee Shilton, who's the Acting Regional Manager for Oz Industry in North Queensland. She's going to talk about federal government grants for SMEs. Yes, they still exist. I don't think there's going to be as many of them in this financial year, but they are there and businesses should be aware of them. You're paying for these through your taxes. Why not take advantage of them? And the other presenter is Kevin Thiel, who's an accountant, but who concentrates on management accounting or cost accounting. And Kevin's going to be talking about what can management accounting do for your business. Now, as a business operator, if you're running a factory, a workshop, or even a retail store, this is where management accounting really comes into play. And I hope that you'll find Kevin's presentation very interesting. To register, please go to our website, esssmallbusiness.com.au/webinars. And for more information, you can go onto our website or send me an email, peter@esssbiztools.com.au. I don't have any further questions. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Trent. And I'm glad you were with us today. And thank you, Arthur, for your presentations today.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so good luck with everything, Arthur. Trent, are you still with us or you had to go? Might have had to go. Okay, so
I'm here, Peter. Thanks again for having me, mate. Really appreciate it.
And you got nothing else you want to add or ask?
No, brilliant. That was really informative at the end as well. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Think about your strategies and funding requirements for 2020-21 now. And that in cases what Arthur was saying about crowdsource funding and what Trent was saying about looking at your social media, your website, your overall promotion. It's 2020. These things are very important in this time that we're now operating, especially as we're trying to meet the challenges of exiting this COVID-19 coronavirus. Thank you for being with us in this webinar today. Have a great day. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.